Good afternoon again to everybody who's just joining. I think I'm going to give it until about 1 or 2 more minutes. But thanks for your patience. Look forward to kicking this off. Okay, I think we have enough to go ahead and get started. So thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm really excited to see some familiar faces as well as some new faces to some of our regional trainings that we've been hosting. My name is Carrie Simmons. I am a regional planner on SANDAG's Sustainable Communities team, and I lead our local jurisdiction housing technical assistance program. For those of you who don't know, our TA program is about a little over a year now, and it's really a little over a year old now, and it's really meant to serve all of our local jurisdiction staff and help with implementation of housing elements, CEQA streamlining, permit streamlining, and really just supporting all of our local staffs through trainings and through making templates and resources for all of you. So that's really what this is coming from. We're really excited to bring this specific training to all of you, and we're really hoping it can help you as you're developing your APRs now. Before passing over to the rest of the team who's really going to take this over and kick this off, I just want to really encourage everybody to ask questions during this webinar and really take the opportunity to engage with some of our presenters, engage with each other. That's what's going to make this the most successful webinar it can be, and really, support all of you and learning from each other and learning from our presenters. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Matt, who's going to kick us off and take us through the rest of our presentation. So thank you all.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. We hope that this presentation on annual progress reports for 2023 is helpful for you all. We are doing this training because, one, we did a little bit of office hours on APRs last year. It seemed to be helpful. So we wanted to come back again this year and offer a more in-depth training, as well as the office hours, which we will cover and remind you all about later in the presentation. Could we go to the next slide, please, to take a look at our agenda? So we are going to start with a presentation from HCD. We have Tom, Kevin, and John, who are going to present on some of the background of APRs, highlight some of the major changes, and talk to you all about how to complete the APR spreadsheet form that HCD publishes. And then we'll have some time for question and answers with the HCD team on APRs. We are going to also take on the topic of maintaining RENA capacity and no net loss during our webinar today, and talk about no net loss requirements and how to track your units as you're doing your APR in relation to no net loss. We have about 10 minutes for that section and 5 minutes for Q&A. And then we'll wrap up our presentation today with talking about some upcoming TA opportunities and next steps as well. So with that, I think we can go ahead and jump into the presentation for today, and I will turn it over to the HCD team to present about APRs.
Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for your interest in this online training for the Housing Element Annual Progress Report, or the APR. I'm John Neuch in Housing Policy Division. I'm co-presenting with my colleague Kevin Rolfness, also in Housing Policy Division. This is an intro to the APR and a walk through the various tables. Afterwards, Tom Brinkhouse will be available for Q&A. Hopefully this presentation will help you to successfully submit the APR for your jurisdiction. Next slide, please. During this webinar, you will gain a stronger sense of the background and the context behind this process, changes for the 2023 version of the APR form, benefits of completing the APR, an overview of the various tables, some helpful features of the form, and how to submit APRs. Next slide, please. To give some context, all jurisdictions in California are required to prepare an annual progress report on the progress they've made to implement their adopted housing elements. That requirement is located in Section 65400 of the Government Code. Section 65400 stipulates that the report must be submitted to both HCD and OPR. Jurisdictions are also required to complete a separate APR for their general plans and submit that to HCD and OPR annually. However, this webinar will only focus on the housing element APR. For the 2023 APR form, there are several new requirements which we'll go over. Last year, SB9 projects were reported on their own table, table I. This year, those projects are reported with all other sorry, I think something happened to the slide.
Oops, sorry about that.
Thank you. So last year, SB9 projects were reported on their own table, which is table I. This year, those projects are reported with all other tables on table A and A2. Table I is no longer on the form. Housing developments utilizing streamlining provisions established by SB6 or AB 2011 must also be reported on table A and table A2. We'll go more in depth into the functionality of those new additions to those tables in future slides. The APR requires local governments to report any adopted tenant preference policies. So we've created a new table for this. You may report this information in table K. And for HCD, complete APR forms can be uploaded directly into our database, or you can email it to apr@hcd.ca.gov. If you need your jurisdiction's username and password combination, it should be the same as last year. And if you need it again, just email us and we will provide it. For the housing element APR submission to OPR, please email the completed Excel workbook to OPR at opr.apr@opr.ca.gov. The 2023 APR is due April 1st, 2024. Let's go ahead to slide 4. I'll go over some of the benefits of submitting APRs. APRs are woven into numerous state oversight and funding programs. Several funding programs require up-to-date submission of APRs, including the Caltrans Sustainable Communities Grant and Permanent Local Housing Allocation, or PLHA, funding program. Some additional programs that require APR submission are the Pro-Housing Designation Program and the Pro-Housing Incentive Program. APRs are how jurisdictions report progress in implementing the housing element and meeting the Regional Housing Need Allocation, or RHNA. The data helps HCD understand successes and challenges from cities and counties statewide, and this information can help inform future housing policy. Finally, data from APRs is used to make HCD's SB 35 determination, also known as a streamlined ministerial approval process. Next slide, please. This is an overview of the form to orient you to the topics for each table. We have tables A through K, which are each represented by a sheet within an Excel workbook. A detailed explanation of each table's requirements can be found in the instructions. The instructions are your definitive source for guidance. Please do note the addition of table K and the removal of table I. Next slide, please.
And I'm just going to jump in here. Kevin, we're seeing your speaker view, so I don't know if you want to switch that to maximize the size of the slides on the screen here.
Yeah, sorry, it worked before.
Yeah, we'll give you a second to
Yeah, give me a sec, thanks.
get it right here.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Now we've got the full PowerPoint. Looks like you're still working through
Yeah. We're a Teams platform over here at the state.
it.
So yeah, bear with us here for a sec. Let's see if I get it. Okay, let me see if I can change the setting here. That work? We still having the same, we still seeing all the
Yeah.
presenter stuff. Still seeing it?
Still seeing the presenter stuff. I'm not sure. Maybe the other view is better just in PowerPoint. I don't know.
Yeah.
There you go.
Oh. We got it?
Yep,
Yes,
it's
thank you,
looking
Gary.
good.
All right. All right, we're on the start here tab.
Back to
Okay,
you,
great.
John.
Yeah,
All
back
right.
to you.
Slide 6, yeah? Okay. So this tab is mostly the same as last year, with the addition of a new tool. Enter the jurisdiction name and all contact information, including the mailing address. There is some conditional formatting in the form. Required cells are highlighted in yellow. Some cells only become yellow once part of the row or table is filled out. So yellow also gives away, yellow also goes away when you've provided the requisite information. So any yellow in your APR should be a flag for you. All tables have required fields, but they get triggered if you start to fill out the table. So if you have no activity to report in a table because it does not apply to your jurisdiction, or your jurisdiction doesn't have activity to report from the reporting year that is relevant to the table, leave it blank. There's no need to add any notes, like nothing to report or NA, because this will cause yellow highlighting to erroneously show up in your APR. There are some exceptions to this. We'll talk about it with the new columns in tables A and A2. And next slide, please. Please note, if you need to add rows to any tables, click the Add Rows button on the Start Here tab. There's a new function to add rows to any of the tables in the APR form. You can add up to 5,000 rows at a time, except for the leaf reporting table. But every other table, you can add rows to it. Next slide, please. The APR form has an Importer button. This copies over information you've entered on a previous year's form. This is useful in Table A2 if you have housing developments that have moved through the planning and building process beyond what was reported in the prior year's APR submission. So you just need to add the additional activity that occurred for a project during the current reporting year. The importer will copy most tables. You can delete any information copied by the importer by selecting a cell in the row and typing Control-D. The importer will ask you if you want to import Table A data. Table A data from a past year APR does not need to be reported in Table A again. However, the project must be reported in Table A2 if any reportable activities occurred during the reporting year. Next slide, please. Okay, Table A. Table A is for any development applications completed during the reporting year. This includes applications for planning approval and applications for development permits, as well as building permits. So to clarify, building permit applications must be reported only if there is no development permit or planning approval applications submitted. For example, if an ADU only requires a building permit and no planning approval, then the application for the ADU building permit would be reported on Table A, and the issuance of the permit would also be reported on Table A2. We want your first application. What's new for 2023 is that Section 9 was modified to specify streamlining provisions. Please use the drop-down selection to pick the appropriate value. So here's one of the exceptions. Please do use the value of none if none of the programs apply. You do need to fill in this cell. Also new for 2023 is Section 12. This is where you would indicate whether the project is considered a ministerial or discretionary project. This column must be completed. Next slide, please. So on table A2, you will report projects that completed entitlements, received a building permit, or obtained a certificate of occupancy during the reporting year. The same properties may be included in both table A and table A2. RENA credit is given based on the building permit section of the table. There are other requirements, but we will move on to the 2023 specific changes. Other information can be provided. Next slide, please. So what's new for 2023 is section 14. Section 14 was modified to specify streamlining provisions. Please use the drop-down selection to pick the appropriate value. Use the value of none if none of the programs apply. Next slide, please. So these slides cover tables that have not had any substantial changes. So you can refer to last year's recorded and posted webinar for specifics on these slides and tables. I believe we hosted, I believe also ABAC has hosted one. SANDAG will also have a recording. So for tables B and C, no changes. We can go to the next slide. Same thing for table D and table E. Next slide, please. Table F and F2, same thing. Next slide. And also for table G and H. Next slide, please. So table H, yeah, this one also has no changes. You can go on to the next slide. Table I, as mentioned before, it was deleted because its functions have been incorporated into tables A and A2. This table J slide is also from last year. No changes. We actually didn't get any data on that, so we can skip that. Table K. So this is new for 2023. Table K allows a jurisdiction to clarify local tenant preference policies. There are fields to indicate links and notes, and also a yellow cell here to indicate yes or no. At this point, I'll be handing off the presentation to my colleague, Kevin. Kevin, take it away.
Thanks, John. And sorry about the PowerPoint issues. Go over to next slide, LEAP reporting. This hasn't changed. Like those other tabs we discussed, if you're a recipient of a LEAP grant, you're required to report on the status. Summary tables. So these tables provide a printer-friendly summaries of auto-populated data from both projects approved using a streamlined ministerial process and the number of applications submitted. These summaries are only there for your own information, and they auto-populate from the other tables. They can be easily printed for your records. New for 2023, the summary tab, we just moved it. So new for 2023, the summary tab is located between finish here and table A, as you can see with the red circle there. An important thing to remember is that the totals in the summary tables are counted based on the dates provided in earlier tables. So, for example, building permits will only be counted if the year the building permit was issued matches the reporting period for that APR. If you notice the totals aren't adding up, you may want to check the dates. And if you see any errors on this with these formulas or with these summaries, just let us know. We'll take a look. And then conditional formatting. The most common reason for APR submissions to fail is due to missing information, but the conditional formatting should help you with that. Anything in the form, John mentioned this earlier, but anything in the form that's highlighted yellow is required. Anything that is green is only required if the fields apply to your project. So for example, in this slide, in table A2, once the APN is listed for the project, that you'll see the conditional formatting. You'll see the required fields like the address and the unit count in yellow. Then the orange headers there and the green highlighting, that's only required if you had an entitlement for that project. Speaking of conditional formatting, we actually added in this Finish Here tab an option to turn it off. And just to review, the Finish Here tab has a couple helpful tools. The first one at the top there is a format option to print tab A2 or table A2. table A2 has a lot of columns, a lot of information. So thought this would be helpful. This creates a workbook with 4 tabs, one for each reportable activity and one with project identifier information. Then the other tool there below the printing tool is a date checker. This will highlight in orange any dates that occurred outside the reporting year. You can leave those activities in the form, but to ultimately get credit for those units and those projects, they must be reported on the APR for that same calendar year. Just a little review on submitting. John already touched upon this, but you can submit on our online system. If you don't have credentials or you don't know your credentials, just username and password, just reach out to us. We can help you get that information. There's a link to the system in the APR form. And of course, you can also submit your Excel workbooks to our email at APR at hcd.ca.gov. And then for the housing element APR to OPR, that is OPR at APR at opr.ca.gov. Let's see. And then also new for 2023, AB 2653 gives us the authority to refer violations of Government Code 65400 to the Attorney General. And we now have the authority to request corrections to the APR and reject an APR should corrections not be made. Some helpful reminders. Again, the APRs are due April 1. Don't worry, we're here to help. If you run into any issues during the submittal process or as you're completing your form, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're actively monitoring that APR inbox, and we have a little team together that it's always ready to help. We love helping. Another reminder, SB 35 determination will be published in June of this year, 2024. And then, of course, there's more information on our website. But and also we just wanted to add that we're excited about the collection of this data, and we appreciate all your hard work providing the data. It's very useful data. And we're also working hard to adapt to those new changes laid out in the legislation. Lastly, stay in the know. We have some resources here for you. Our communications division is excellent at pushing announcements. And then if you have not subscribed, we encourage you to sign up for our emails. And that's it for the presentation. Thank you for your time today. We'll pass it over to my colleague, Tom. He's going to take the lead on Q&A. And I can thankfully end my screen share.
Well, thank you, Kevin and John. If anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. You can also, I believe, unmute yourself and ask directly. So we will pause here for a couple of minutes to make sure you get a chance to ask your questions. I'm surprised I didn't see any in the chat during the presentation. That's okay. And then I'll also share, we have scheduled office hours during the month of February. Every Wednesday during the lunch hour, we will make our team available to you all for any questions on a drop-in basis. We will have the HCD team available for the first and third sessions, and the Ascent and SANDAG teams will be there for all of the sessions in February. So we're offering 4 sessions as you work through all of these issues and completing your APRs. If you hit any roadblocks or just aren't sure, what to do with some of the information, the office hours are a good time to do that. You can, of course, also email apr@hcd.ca.gov, which I put in the chat. Not seeing any questions. I think we can go forward with the no net loss presentation, and I'll introduce Chelsea Payne from Ascent, who's going to be giving an overview of no net loss requirements. And I do see we got a question in the chat. So we'll pause here, Chelsea. Sorry for the false start
no
here.
worries. Let's take some questions.
Yeah, so I think first question I see is, how do we access the office hours? Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's the same Zoom link that we are all on right now can be used to access any of the office hours in the future. Is that correct?
No, actually, I'll
No,
put
it's
a
not.
link
Okay.
to the Zoom in the chat. That'll be a recurring meeting, so I'll put that up here shortly.
Okay, and then I think we'll also follow up via email with a link as well. So that's at your fingertips and your email inbox as well. But again, it's just a drop-in basis. Everyone's welcome, and we'll, kind of just be answering questions as they come in. And then we've got some questions on the EPR form. So first question is, in Table A, if we have a project that is demolishing a single family and replacing it with a single family unit, does that need to be reported? Tom, are you able to jump in and answer that question? All right.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thanks for the question. Yes, that should be reported. So in years past, HCD sort of put out guidance stating you should only report net new units. However, that has changed. There were some statutory changes that that got rid of the net new language, which was confusing to folks. So yes, you should report on all new housing units, whether or not they're replacement units or just brand new units. So you should report everything on both Table A and Table A2. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. And Melinda, if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to enter that into the chat. I'm going to go on to the next question from Grant. So Grant's from the city of San Diego, I believe, and is describing they have a local ADU bonus program. An applicant can have an additional market rate unit if they include a deed restricted affordable ADU. I was looking for guidance on how to enter this information in columns AI to the right of Table A2.
Yeah, so let's see, column AI is the extremely low income column. So yeah, I'm not sure if that's the one you're referring to, but if it is, then you would report you have to report the number of units that are affordable in any of the in activity sections, we call them. So one of the entitlement section, building permit section, or a certificate of occupancy section, whichever of those apply. Might be one of them, it might be all of them. If it's extremely low, you would have to report them in the very low income section for the applicable activities, and then you would report how many of them are extremely low. So it might be 0, it might be 1. If you're also reporting, wondering how to report the affordability that's provided pursuant to that ordinance, you would report that in column AM, and you would select other as applicable. I mean, this might qualify as like an inclusionary ordinance. If so, you would report it as that. So it's really based on, I guess, on how you classify your ordinance. And that affordability would be documented in column AM, and then provided that it's deed restricted, which I believe you said it was. Yes, so that's how you would report it. The affordability would be in column AM, and then you report the unit in the appropriate affordability columns.
Yeah, thank you for the information.
Yeah,
I just,
hopefully that helps. Yeah.
yeah, most definitely. I was also wondering, like, there's some other columns, like, so for example, total density applied to the project as a percentage of the base dwelling unit. So that would be column 21 or AS. So we need to fill that out as a percentage, or could we leave, or did we have to put that information in as well? And then even in column 22, it says number of other incentives. So for that affordable unit, the incentive would be that you could have another market rate unit. So do we fill in information there and kind of explain that?
Yeah, so those columns 21 through 24, those apply to density bonus projects.
Okay. Right, okay.
So that would be if you select DB in column AM,
okay.
then you would fill out the additional information. So this doesn't really sound like state density bonus.
No, that's a local program.
Okay, yeah, so you would not need to complete those columns then.
Okay. Thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry if you don't mind me jumping in. I'm glad you asked that, because we see a lot of jurisdictions fill out those columns unnecessarily because they didn't. It's only required if you, as Tom said, put DB in column AM.
Makes sense. Thank you.
We do have a sort of related question on density bonus projects from Chris. It says column 16 is required for density bonus projects, but what if there is no assistance program? Would we put other?
So you can leave the assistance program. So that would be column AL or section 16. You can leave that blank. If there's no financial assistance program that is contributing to the affordability, if it's just produced through a density bonus, then yeah, you can leave that column blank.
All right, thank you, Tom and Chris. Hopefully that answers your question. We'll move on to Rachel's question. How do we report single-family homes converted to boarding houses and residential care facilities?
So that's not reportable on the APR. That sounds like something that you might report to Department of Finance as a unit loss potentially, but that activity is not reportable on the APR because that sounds like housing units being converted to group quarters. Which, yeah, is not reportable. So you don't need to report that.
All right, thank you. And I think one more question before we move on to no net loss topics. From Dana, it says, in Table D, do programs objectives that have been reported to be completed in previous APRs need to be continuously reported on throughout the cycle?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't hurt to include them. Even though the program may be complete, you don't have any updates to it because it's completed. I would say include it. Just for your own, just for keeping all of your the public and your elected council just up, aware of everything. Not to mention us. So I would say yes, please continue to include it.
All right, thank you, Tom. If anyone does have further questions, feel free to continue to put them in the chat. If we have available time, we can circle back on them. Otherwise, we can try and follow up in writing with you and everyone else. So with that, let's go ahead and turn to our next topic, and I'll turn it over to you, Chelsea.
All right. Thank you, Matt. Hi, everyone. I'm Chelsea Payne. I'm Assistance Director of Urban Planning. I'm going to talk about no net loss law. Just want to note that the HCD team that we have here today is not the team that deals with no net loss law, so we're not going to pepper them with questions. I will do my best to answer questions that you have, but just wanted to set those expectations. Next slide, please. So not sure how familiar everyone is with no net loss law, so I'm going to kind of start from the beginning. But no net loss has been a part of state law since 2002. So technically, we should all be tracking the status of our RENA. It's been on the books for a while, but the legislature made some pretty significant changes to no net loss law in 2018 that really strengthened the law and made it really important to be tracking the details of the sites inventory. What no net loss law says is that all jurisdictions are required to maintain adequate sites to meet the RENA throughout the entire housing element planning period. So everyone prepares their sites inventory up front when they prepare the housing element. They show that they have adequate capacity to meet the RENA, but then there's also a requirement to be tracking development activity, particularly on your housing element sites, to be able to determine that you can maintain that capacity throughout the entire 8-year planning period. So what that means is if a city or county takes any action to downzone a housing element site or to approve a housing development on a site with fewer units or a different income level, you have to make written findings that the remaining capacity on the other housing element sites is adequate to meet the remaining RENA for your lower and moderate income housing. If at any point you find that you do not have enough capacity to meet the remaining RENA, you need to identify and make available a replacement site within 180 days. And that replacement site has to meet all of the site's inventory criteria of being an appropriate site for housing at that income level. So it needs to be able to meet the bar that's set for other housing element sites. Next slide, please. So just to say that another way, if a site in the housing element inventory is downzoned to reduce the density, approved with a project at a lower density or fewer number of units than what's counted in your housing element inventory, or approved for a higher income level than what's shown in the inventory. For example, if you approve a market rate multifamily development on a lower income housing site, or if you approve a commercial development on maybe one of your mixed use sites where you had counted housing units. When you're approving that project, you must make written findings that first, that the reduction in density is consistent with your general plan, that the remaining sites that are in your housing element are adequate to accommodate your remaining RENA for each income level. And you have to quantify those numbers. You have to quantify what the unmet RENA is and quantify the remaining capacity by income level in those findings. And then again, if you cannot make those findings of sufficient capacity, then the jurisdiction has 180 days to make a replacement site available. Next slide. The burden here is on the city or county and not on the developer. So if a housing development is proposed and it's consistent with the adopted general plan and zoning standards, you can't use this no net law issue as a reason for denying that project. And the developer does not have a responsibility to develop the site at the income level or for the number of units that were counted in your housing element inventory. It's also not the developer's responsibility to find a replacement site. So the burden is on the city to do that. Again, from the time that the action is taken to approve that project on your housing element site, you have 180 days to add that replacement site into your housing element inventory. So this usually means that you're rezoning a site and doing any required CEQA for that rezone. But it could also mean that you're identifying a site that's already zoned appropriately, that maybe you overlooked it when you were doing your housing element inventory. Maybe you have new information about an underutilized site and you can prove the availability of that site during the planning period. So most likely you're going to be rezoning, but not necessarily. It's a matter of finding a replacement site. So bottom line, it's really important to be tracking progress in meeting the RENA and keeping a running tally of the capacity in your site's inventory. And we know that some jurisdictions are already doing this tracking, but we also know that some are still struggling with setting up a process to stay on top of the capacity numbers. So Matt, I'll pitch it to you to kind of talk about what we've been working on for the no net loss template.
Yeah, so we have been working on a no net loss tracking tool to share out to jurisdictions here in the San Diego region. We are very close to finishing that out and being ready to share that with you all. It's not quite as sophisticated as the APR tracking tool, which may be good and giving you some flexibility to adapt it to your other needs, but it also may be more prone to user error and breaking the formula. So we're trying to balance those two things by providing some additional guidance on how to complete the form and make sure you all can understand what it looks like. I'm going to share my screen really quickly just to kind of give you all a preview of what we're working on. But basically it's got this summary tab. Can you all see my screen? It looks like not. All right, getting a thumbs up from Chelsea, thank you. But it's got a summary tab showing what the original RENA allocation was, what the housing capacity is on housing element sites that remains, that doesn't have projects approved on it, what planned and approved projects that were included in the housing element, what the capacity on those are, which may change as project entitlements change. We're trying to track development activity on sites that were not in the housing element, whether that's lower income or not. And then factoring in ADU production and, if applicable, rezone sites. So at the bottom, it shows what the surplus and or deficit is in individual income categories and overall for your jurisdiction. So it would take some work to customize this for the RENA. We have a tab to input your site's inventory by APN and track that affordability. So as it moves through the process from just an available site in the inventory to a pending project, you could enter in how many units are in lower, moderate, or above moderate, and see the net difference in individual income categories and overall. A similar tab for pipeline projects, planned projects that are in your housing elements, the rezone tab as well. Projects on other sites you would enter in here if they're not in your housing element inventory, and ADU production by year that would be reported out based on your APR. So that's where we've started and are going. Like I said, we're trying to provide some additional notes and guidance to make this all useful for you all. So we will be sharing this tool out via email once we complete that guidance. If this is something that's of interest to you, we're happy to work with you all to make sure it works for you and, perhaps help you populate some baseline information for your jurisdiction. So that's where we're going with no net loss tracking. Yeah, so I think that's it for our presentation on no net loss. we do have a couple questions, so I'm going to turn to those. So first, if a net loss is determined and a new site is identified, what is required to update the housing element? Is it a report on table C on the APR?
That is a very good question that we've been asking ourselves and trying to get a clear answer from HCD. I'll share my understanding of it, and we're going to work to get confirmation of this. Yes, there's an aspect of the APR table C where you can report sites rezoned to meet a shortfall, an unaccommodated need. And I believe a no net loss is one of the reasons you would report on that site. But my understanding is it's not really the APR team that's tracking and the enforcement of that. And so we'll provide some links to guidance documents. There's a no net loss memo that HCD prepared back in 2017, 2018. But there is some language saying that it's required that jurisdictions update the housing element and submit to HCD and adding those new sites into your inventory. We're going to work to get clarification on what that process is. Because you wouldn't want to trigger a wholesale review of your housing element. You would want to focus HCD on this one issue, a no net loss issue. But it does say that you are required to update your housing element sites inventory and submit to HCD. So I would imagine that involves a housing element amendment, which is a general plan amendment within that 180-day timeframe.
Yeah, Chelsea, I would just say that, yeah, as far as the housing element update piece and what's required for that we'll have to provide additional information around those specifics. But as far as the APR goes, yes, table C has a table C is meant for those sites to be included. So if you rezone additional sites due to no net loss, or you just identify the site, perhaps the site already has adequate zoning, that site would be included in table C. There is a one of the options in the drop down of the what category site? Oh, it's called rezone type is the column name, but you can include one of the options is no net loss. So you would identify that the site is being included in table C due to no net loss. So that should satisfy the APR requirements. But once again, the specifics around what actually needs to be changed in the housing element, we'll have to follow up with you all with additional information on what exactly that looks like.
It looks like we got that question, two versions of that question. So I think we've discussed what we need to discuss in response to both of those. And I did link to the SB 166 guidance from HCD that was published in 2019. So hopefully that's the right one you were referring to, Chelsea. It looked like it was.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, thank you, Matt.
Okay, and we will also include it in the follow-up email as well. Go ahead.
Yeah, just one answer to Nicole's questions about other documents that need to be completed. We did talk about, right, the housing element needs to be updated, table C, but the requirement for written findings are really in your findings, right? Your staff report, your findings in approving projects, those need to contain those written findings. So that creates the record that establishes the start date of your no net loss issue. So just those written findings are an important part of the record. And then it's about updating your housing element from there.
And I also was trying to share while you were presenting an example of some of those required findings that we pulled from a staff report, and I cannot share a Word document through Zoom. So we'll have to follow up via email, but it's kind of got some placeholder informations to support your findings related to unit counts, etc. So hopefully that's another reference and tool you all can refer to in those findings. And then I see we have another question. What if the city cannot find an alternative site to make up the no net loss within 6 months due to environmental constraints / private property, etc.?
So my understanding is, I mean, that's a deadline, just like any housing element deadline. I think it then becomes an issue of enforcement and accountability. So HCD's enforcement and accountability arm could follow up on that. I would imagine the first step might be the certification of the housing element, because you wouldn't have adequate capacity, but I imagine HCD's enforcement and accountability arm would sort of open a case on that and be working with you and checking in on the timeline. I don't think there's anything that you automatically lose certification of your housing element. There would have to be action taken by HCD to revoke that compliance.
And another question just came in, and I think you answered this one during your presentation, but maybe warrants more discussion to highlight. And the question is, so if a private developer chooses to build at less than maximum site density, the city would still be on the hook?
And yes, that's correct. So if a developer comes in, say you have a site that at the max density you could get 100 units, but it may be at the minimum density a developer could build as few as 30 units, and you counted 80 units in your housing element. That developer can come in at the minimum density as long as there aren't any other policies that prohibit that, right? If your standards in your general plan, your zoning allow for 30 units on that site, there's nothing stopping a developer from coming in and building at that lower density. So that's why in your housing element, there's sort of a balance of usually not assuming the maximum unless you really expect projects to come in at that maximum.
And the same is also true for affordability levels that are assumed in the housing element. If a development differs from what's assumed on that site, the city's still responsible for maintaining capacity at lower, moderate, and above moderate income to meet the RHNA. So it's not just the density, it's the affordability to take into account as well.
And that was really the major change that went into effect with the change in legislation in 2018, SB 166. It used to be you really just had to track a site by the number of units that were built compared to what you counted. But SB 166 changed that to say the number of units by income level. So now you have to track if you counted a site as lower income, but you got an above moderate and market rate project on that site, then there's the loss of those units in your lower income RHNA capacity.
All right, well, I think we're close to 1 p.m. here. So let's start to wrap up our webinar today. And I'll do that by saying we're available again for office hours next Wednesday, February 7th, February 14th, February 21st, and February 28th from 12 to 1 on those days. As noted, HCD will be available on the February 7th and February 21st dates, and we will be available on the other dates as well. So if you have follow-up questions on APRs or no net loss and want to talk about either of those topics, bring your questions, bring your spreadsheets, and we can work through any issues you're struggling with or have questions about. Other topics we are working to address this spring. Keep an eye out for an invitation to a workshop on accessory dwelling units. We are planning for March, so stay tuned for a final date on that. And then in April, we are planning a land value capture workshop around some of the studies that SANDAG is preparing for the region. So that's something to look out for regional trainings this spring. Also, SANDAG is hosting a Housing Policy Leadership Academy and Housing Policy Boot Camp starting in February, going to June, as well as hosting upcoming housing policy forums in 2024. So I don't know if anyone wants to share any more details on that from the SANDAG team. Arya, you want to jump in?
Hey, yeah, everybody. My name is Arya Puniki, and I work with the Global Policy Leadership Academy. We're partnering with SANDAG to provide these regional trainings, and I'll be dropping some links in the chat here in a second. So I just want to give a little bit of background about what these resources are. So and I guess I don't see it on the slide, but oh, I see it now. Yeah, so I'll first talk the Housing Policy Leadership Academy. So the Housing Policy Leadership Academy is a 10-week course that is being sponsored by SANDAG. It's free for participants, so we encourage folks to apply. There are limited seats at that. And what it is, it just walks you through a curriculum that takes you through leadership and coalition building skills, land use and planning strategies, and as well as housing policies and case studies. We have conversations and fishbowls and panels and a lot of things to just really help build general knowledge around housing policy. So if we have anybody who's newer to housing policy here or wants to continue to expand their vocabulary and skills and competencies in this space, this is a great opportunity. We also want to encourage you to share this with folks on your staff. It could be a really great part of your goals for this year in terms of professional development. So I'll drop that in the chat. The application as well as the brochure I'm dropping into the chat. And just note that applications are due on February 22nd. So you'll see I've linked the brochure there as well as the link to the application if it's something you're interested in. It starts March 7th and is 10 weeks long, 2.5 hours per session towards the end of your Thursday afternoon. So most of the sessions will be virtual, and we'll have a little bit of pre-work and reading and discussion. So that's what the Housing Policy Leadership Academy is. The second thing that we're offering is the Housing Policy Boot Camp, which comes directly after the Housing Policy Leadership Academy. You don't need to take the academy to do the boot camp, but it's suggested that you do. And the boot camp is a 5-week program starting on May 16th that follows HPLA, where participants will be able to work together in small teams to work on a housing policy proposal, which will be presented and evaluated by a panel of experts on the final session. And so I'm going to drop the application link in here as well. And it just really offers this great opportunity for you to work on a policy you're excited about. And we guide you through the policymaking process step by step, where you can work together with a small team. You can join as a small team, or you can be put together in a small team. And at the end of those 4 weeks, on the 5th session, you'll be creating a short presentation and communicating why your policy is great to a panel of experts and local leaders who will give you an evaluation. So those are the two really big things that SANDAG is offering. Both are free. We encourage you to share the good news with everybody in your teams. If you're a manager, this could be a great thing for your employees or your direct reports to sign up for as a part of their continuing education and professional development. And one other thing that we're working on with SANDAG is our 2024 Legislative Forum, which will be on February 14th. I'm dropping the link to register for that here. So this forum will be taking you through legislative analysis through some of the bills that passed last year in 2023. We'll be taking a look at the governor's proposed budget and impacts to housing programs. And we'll also be looking at different trends that we're expecting in 2024. We have a panel of experts who will be weighing in, and we've got some different legislative analysis on those bills as well. So we look forward to having you sign up for that as well. Again, that's February 14th from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. Now that I've shared all that, just really quickly want to see if you have any questions before I hand it back. See any hands raised, but I will be dropping my email in here as well. So if you are interested and you have any questions, feel free to email me at aria@gpla.co, and I'll be able to help answer those questions. I can help set up, an info session if you want one with your staff. We're looking to get as many folks who are in the profession as possible, because this is a resource funded by SANDAG, and we want to make sure that we're helping create these competencies and knowledge around these programs across the county.
All right. Thanks, Ari. Sounds like a lot of great trainings and programs you guys are working on. So hopefully get some signups and people take advantage of that. We've got one last kind of call and action item for everyone on the webinar today. And that's to please take our Housing Acceleration Program TA Technical Assistance Feedback Survey. We've been doing a lot of different programs in 2023 to try and address all of the complicated and changing and dynamic regulatory requirements around housing, and really trying to answer some of these complicated questions that you all face day to day in your jobs as you're reviewing projects or working with your councils to set policy. So we want to make sure we're maximizing our impact and making hopefully your job a little bit easier. So we want to know what's helpful, what's worked, and what topics we should think about addressing in 2024 and beyond. So please take that survey and give us some feedback on what's working and how we can help you all, like I said. So Paul put the link in the chat, and we'll also send that around via email as well. So next slide, please. That is it for today. So thank you all again for taking time out of your day. Hopefully you found this training helpful. You can always stay up to date on SANDAG's HAP TA program via the project website. You can reach the TA team directly at the email sandag_HAPTA@Ascent Environmental. Our whole team gets those emails, so we're able to respond if you have any questions or need anything. And of course, you can always contact Carrie directly at her SANDAG email address. Before we close the webinar, I want to say thank you first to the HCD team, Kevin, John, and Tom. We appreciate you lending your insights and expertise and taking time out of your day to join us today. So thank you very much. We appreciate it. And then thank you to Chelsea as well for jumping in on No Net Loss and doing your best to channel HCD. So thank you, Chelsea. With that, thank you everyone for joining today. And again, we hope to see you at the webinars and future training. So that concludes our webinar. Thank you.